Well, Iowa did it to Nebraska again. But on the second hand, nobody got pepper sprayed.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get into basketball with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet hits. Visit FanDuel.com today to get started.
Okay, welcome in. It is Sunday, December 1st. It's December, so we had to come at you on December. We have stuff, obviously, from Friday in Iowa City to discuss. I am Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone is with me. We're going to get to everything that went down on Friday in Iowa City and in this college football weekend. Let's start with the big story. Iowa 13, Nebraska 10. The Hawkeyes forced a turnover with 20 seconds to play, kicked a field goal to win it. No, this is not 2023. It is 2024. Do not adjust your controls. Same end, same score, same result, with Iowa celebrating, taking the Heroes Trophy off the field. This time it was Drew Stevens, who was benched a year ago in Lincoln when Marshall Meter hit the game-winning kick field goal. Stevens hits it from 53 yards in the 13-degree air in Iowa City. It was completely stunning. But then again, not really stunning, because we've seen this happen before, and now we sit here and wonder why it happened again. We're going to get to that in this show, how Iowa has a formula it has nearly perfected to beat Nebraska. And as Matt Rhule said, Connor, Nebraska just has to be better. Is that the answer?
Well, first of all, yes, this game has happened 4 times now. It's not just this year and last year. It's like, or maybe 8 times. I have no idea. I feel like I've seen it 100 times. But even still, you can't oversell how ridiculous it is that Nebraska keeps losing these games, and not just these games in general, because we've talked about that all the time, but these games to Iowa. It doesn't, like, even as it's playing out, you're like, oh wow, I've seen this story play out before. People aren't allowed to be surprised or anything like that. I'm still shocked every single time. Every time it happens, when Dylan Raiola dropped the fumble, and when the whole call went the other way, or when they kick the field goal and they make the first one easily, and then the timeout is called, but then the second one is made by this much. It's all part of the script. Apparently, the script writers for this game are incredible.
They're on strike because they just turned in the same one from a year ago.
Well, the movies are when you got a good franchise, I guess.
True.
You just stick with the same formula over and over and over again, and that's what seems to be happening here.
Let's talk about how Nebraska dominated this game. I mean, the reality is Iowa had one play on offense that did anything that led to even anything remotely close to points for the Hawkeyes. They ran 3 plays inside the Nebraska 35-yard line in the entire game, 20 yards in the first half. Those 3 plays came after Nebraska muffed a punt. Inexplicably muffed a punt with the senior out there who's supposed to be sure-handed, get away from the ball if he can't get to it, make fair catches. That's the entire reason that Isaiah Garcia Castaneda is back fielding punts, because that's what he can do. And he messed it up. And then Vincent Shavers in the mad scramble touches the punt. Those are the only 3 plays. And it was a great moment for Nebraska on defense, as it turned out, because the Huskers stuffed the Hawkeyes at the goal line. But you started to feel things unwind for Nebraska in that moment. Even maybe a series or 2 before that, the offense, which looked fantastic on the final drive of the first half as Nebraska went up 10-zip, it was a little out of sync in the second half. The whole second half, I thought the timing and the rhythm wasn't there, and then things started to come apart at the seams with the special teams mistake, and then you saw the big play to Caleb Johnson where Nebraska was knocking itself to the ground off of him, and next thing you know, it's 10-10, and at that point, like, you have to pick Iowa.
It was after Nebraska goes down on their first drive of the second half. Remember, they go into the locker room with a 10-0 lead. And I mean, feeling obviously really good about themselves. They've dominated the first half. Like you said, Iowa's got 20 yards at halftime. Nebraska comes out, they get the ball right away, and they drive all the way down the field, and it stalls out at the 16-yard line of Iowa. And then they go to kick a field goal, and the snap is bad, and the kick is pulled, and it's still 10-0. And you're like, well, I don't know how, that is not a good omen. And then immediately after that, Nebraska's defense comes out and gets a stop again. Iowa punts it away, and that's when the punt return situation that you just described happens. So right there, that's a key, 4 so minutes in the game, and that's what started to get that ball moving the other direction for Iowa.
They're standing on the edge of a cliff there, which shouldn't be the case. It should be Iowa on the edge of the cliff when it's 10-0 and Nebraska's rolling offensively in the middle 8. Matt Rhule likes to talk about the middle 8, which is the final 4 minutes of the first half where Nebraska played its best offense of the game. Just 1 third down on that 70-plus yard drive that Nebraska had to finish off the first half, and it was a 3rd and 1 that Dante Dowdell picked up near the goal line. So that was Dana Holgorsen, like the Dana Holgorsen that we saw, Nebraska's offensive coordinator against Wisconsin, like the work that he did consistently in that game to keep the Badgers on their heels. That's what he did on that drive at the end of the first half. And then Nebraska, having won the coin toss, you think, all right, here's the chance to secure the middle 8. If you get 2 touchdown drives right there in that stretch coming out at the start of the third quarter to go up 17 zip. I mean, I don't know if it's over. Nebraska was up 24-0 against Iowa 2 years ago in Iowa City, and they find a way to scratch and claw and not panic and get back into it. I don't think it's over at 17 zip early in the second half, but like the way the Nebraska defense was playing, it was close. It was going to be a tough haul.
In their offense by that point, like, if you just stop it in the middle of the game right there after that first drive of the third quarter, Nebraska's offense is starting to put together some good drives as well, and they're putting together yards. I mean, but you mentioned it a couple minutes ago, 334 to 164 in total yards, 20 first downs to 5 first downs. These are all Nebraska's favor.
5 first downs. 5.
Yeah. Pick Six previews. He had a stat on Friday night that Iowa is the first FBS team to win a game with 5 first downs since at least 2000 or something
ridiculous.
Like that.
It's ridiculous. Yeah.
It's absurd. 0 for 10 on third downs. Nebraska, spends like 80% of their time in press conferences talking about how they need to be good on third down. And they were excellent on third down. They didn't allow anything on third down. 0 conversions, 0 for 10, 0 for 0 on fourth down. So they never got to a fourth down. They just punted every time. Nebraska ran 76 plays. Iowa ran 41 plays. And still, it was not enough.
Let's talk about the end of the game strategy, because this was a question I asked Matt Rhule about in the post-game press conference, and I like his answer. For the record, I agree with his answer. I asked how you balance the danger of committing an error that can lead you to lose the game versus doing what you have to do to try to run the clock and, of course, score. I mean, the last thing Nebraska wants to do, or, well, not the last thing. The last thing Nebraska wants to do is do what it did. But one of the last things Nebraska wants to do is go to overtime when it doesn't have to, because of it's on the road and just like the terrible execution that Nebraska has shown in OT. So you got to try to score. And there was a minute 42 on the clock. Nebraska had it at 20-yard line. And, okay, get in field goal range. Here you go. And Dylan Raiola started off okay. They moved the chains a couple times, but do you want to be risky? Do you want to drop back and throw there? What do you do in that situation? Like it seems like a no win. Matt Rhule said you have to play to win. If you're not playing to win, you're going to lose. So ultimately it didn't work. Raiola gets sacked and he fumbles with 20 seconds to go. As we mentioned, it's same story as last year.
It's a tricky spot for Nebraska's offense too, because Dylan, I think one of the big complaints about him this year is that he's been like overly risk averse, right? He He
Check
really
downs.
doesn't want to turn the football over. So
Yeah,
he might not be the worst quarterback to have in that situation, but at the same time, you can't nickel and dime it down the field. Right. So like you kind of have to go because there's a minute 42 left and you're on your own 20-yard line and you have two timeouts or one timeout at that point.
It had two, I think. But yeah, I mean, the clock wasn't really their enemy. It was the overwhelming concern that they were going to lose the game. And I after 24 games under Matt Rhule, I still think that feeling permeates the huddle. Even with the new quarterback and some of the young players, I feel like even like Isaiah Nair on the previous drive, right through the wickets, right through his hands. There's an opportunity for Nebraska in a 10-10 game to go down and get. It doesn't have to be on the last drive. Like we've discussed this before, just because like your destiny says that the game is going to come down to the last drive. It doesn't have to come down to the last drive. If you make that catch on the second to last drive, maybe you're just running out the clock when you get it back at the end.
Yeah, because what confidence? I mean, that was really the only way for Iowa to win that game in a lot of different ways. But like, they weren't going to put together an 80-yard 2-minute drive to score in Nebraska's defense down by 7. You know, the only way that they were going to win it in regulation was, or the game period was either take it to overtime or have exactly what happened. You know, and even then they almost screwed it up. I mean, they got the ball. And, you know, Nebraska fumbles on the 36. They're immediately in field goal range. And then they go backwards a yard, you know, like they on the second play. So like they could have really hurt themselves in that situation. They weren't going to go down the field.
No, they had an ability to cover about 1 yard in that moment. That's it. Like Nebraska turned it over at like the edge of like 5 more yards upfield. You get sacked and you fumble there. Stevens isn't hitting a 60-yarder, like 7 more yards upfield. But credit to him, and you know he was kind of a jackass in the post-game press conference, calling Dylan, you know, Mahomes Jr., whatever. Like these Iowa guys, we'll talk about this the next series. Like, you know, act like, I don't know, if you're going to embrace the rivalry, then don't act surprised when Nebraska shows you disrespect. But whatever, great kick. I mean, that is like, you know, ice in the veins in that weather to hit that kick, but that's been on his mind all year. He didn't get the opportunity a year ago, had to give it to his backup, and there you go.
All right. Well, coming up next, the coin toss, the handshake, the laps around the field, the excessive handshakes, the post-game press conferences, all of it when we return. All right, Locked on Nebraska listeners, get ready for sports on Sunday with the NFL because you got FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL or, of course, pregame as well. We are gearing up for an exciting month of the NFL season. Everything's coming down to the wire this month. And then, of course, you want to be in by the time January hits when the playoffs are here. So when you get that hunch in the middle of the game, you could check out anything you need on the FanDuel Sportsbook app, or of course, get you ready before it starts. Head to FanDuel.com to join today. Once again, $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, welcome back. Connor Happer, Mitch Sherman with you. So first of all, globally, it was a weekend of fights and planting flags and all that stuff. Nebraska, there was quite the conversation with their game with Iowa. I think, you know, like I guess in the bubble here, in the Nebraska-Iowa bubble, it was outdone about 18 times on Saturday by you know, ultimately Ohio State and Michigan ending with pepper spray on the field. I mean, nuts.
There's a lot of hand wringing on Friday night and Saturday morning about what Nebraska did in refusing to shake hands with Iowa in the pregame coin toss situation. And I wondered at several moments on Saturday afternoon and Saturday night as we saw Michigan and Iowa get into Michigan and Ohio State get in a huge fight on the field with police involved and people being, I mean, legitimately injured in that situation. There'll be suspensions for Ohio State in the college football playoff, most likely, that have ramifications. This could affect Ryan Day's job status if it was already affected by the game, but the fact that his team went and did what it did after the game is not going to reflect well on his ability to continue as Ohio State's coach. There were fights in Auburn, Alabama. I think there was a flag planting incident in Arizona State, Notre Dame, USC. I saw punches being thrown with linemen on the ground. So all that said, we're going to get really upset about the fact that went out to the pregame coin toss and refused to shake hands with Iowa. So I wrote about this, and thank you for all of the response. I'm not going to read it all. I dove in on Saturday afternoon and read some of it, but I guess I picked the right thing to address after the game, because like this got more engagement, more reaction from fans, both positive and mostly negative, than just about anything I've written all football season. So look, I love the fact that Nebraska refused to shake hands with Iowa before the game? No. Do I understand it? Absolutely. Nebraska's been provoked for years, and that happened again on Friday when the Huskers got out on the field and there were police guarding the 50-yard line. Like if it had been unprovoked, like a preemptive action of unsportsmanship, I'm probably not as okay with it. But the fact is, like, Iowa has been goading Nebraska for years by blowing kisses and waving and sending these sarcastic holiday greetings. Like Nebraska started it perhaps with Sean Eichhorst, or as I heard on Saturday from one fan, Nebraska started it by joining the Big Ten. How dare Nebraska join the Big Ten? Whatever, it's been going on. And so Jay Higgins, the Iowa linebacker, star linebacker, after the game, he brought it to everyone's attention that Nebraska refused to shake hands. And he had some issues with Matt Rhule that I'm not exactly clear about. I didn't see any video evidence or in-person evidence of Rhule really doing anything himself that showed a lack of sportsmanship. Maybe he did. Maybe Higgins is exaggerating, but there was like this sanctimonious attitude from Iowa, like that they're above this, like that they were shocked that Nebraska would walk to the center of the field and stand there silently. I mean, don't act like you're above it, like you're part of it. That to me, from Nebraska, was like a message more to themselves that they were done being Iowa's little brother than it was anything else. So, of course, it was a sign of disrespect. Good. Show disrespect. It's a rivalry. Play the game with respect, which both teams did. Don't fight in the games. Great. You do that and you don't want to shake hands before the game. All right. Fine with me.
Yeah, there was never a fight. I mean, there was never. It was hardly ever even a skirmish. In the game.
Clean game.
Yeah, it was a pretty clean game in that way. So we do have to put in perspective what we're talking about, given the rest of what's happened around college football this weekend and how we've seen that whole thing play out. I'll say this: like, I would have rather had them shake hands in the pregame meeting. Like I'm not mad about it, and I think you see this stuff happens all the time. But when I see it, or if it ever, like, if the other team never shook your hand before the game or after the game as an athlete, like, you're like, what are you doing, man? Like it's just one of those things where it's like, we're not asking that much of you in this situation, and what are you really showing, and what are you really proving by not doing it? Right. So it just feels like a really easy thing to do. And you could, if you hate them, whatever, you could swallow your pride for 10 seconds and you could shake their hands and say, have a good game. Everyone does it everywhere without incident, generally. So
yeah, it may want to be something that Nebraska looks at moving forward. Like, I get the point. I understand why they did it. Could they be above it? Sure. Did it impact, my feelings about the Nebraska program? Like, am I like, do I have a different view of them now? No. Jamari Butler did suggest Saturday on social media that Nebraska has done this previously this year.
Yeah. I think this is maybe the second or third time.
Yeah. He said check the captains from the Ohio State and USC games. So it's if this is like a part of their pregame routine, like the signature of part of the signature of Nebraska football, like that they refuse to shake hands before a game. Like, I'm probably not like as on board with that. But if it's just Iowa, which and you feel that Iowa has been rubbing this in your face that they've beat you, not just taking the trophy and going, but like purposely rubbing it in your face, like then okay, I'm okay with it.
Like it's pretty clear, as exemplified by Jay Higgins' words and everything else we heard come out of the Iowa press conference afterwards, that there's already these two teams already don't like each other. It was a juiced up atmosphere, that whole thing. Like they are going to take whatever motivation they could possibly find and apply it to them, and then talk about it afterwards when they win. Nebraska would have done the exact same thing. Nebraska would have laughed in their faces had they won the game. So that's the way it goes. When you take an L, you got to just eat it, sometimes. And I don't think Iowa, like the Rhule walking through the warm-ups thing in the pregame. I saw some.
I believe
video.
he's just walking around the field.
Yeah, he takes his normal laps.
And a lot of coaches do.
Yeah, he takes his normal laps before the game. But I would imagine Rhule felt some type of way about this game as well. Maybe not necessarily like disrespected or whatever, but hey, we want to win it. We want to find the motivation to be able to win it. So I support the players and their sort of endeavors for that. I'll be curious. Well, I don't know that we'll ever hear from Matt Rhule on this issue, but
probably will. He's going to talk Wednesday. It's signing day on Wednesday, and
That's right.
I got to think that he's going to get asked about this. I mean, I'm sure he will get asked about it on Wednesday, or just make a statement. I hope they don't apologize. Like, it's not a thing to apologize for. I know that I saw some ex-Huskers on social media saying Nebraska will apologize for this. It's like, you're going to apologize for not shaking. Like, come on, guys.
Just shake their hands. That's my only thing. Like, just shake their hands. It's not a huge deal. Just shake their hands. It doesn't seem that hard. And honestly, if I think it's a little corny. Like, you're going up there to the thing and you're like, you're trying to act all tough before the game even starts. Like,
again, like, so what Shiloh Sanders did before the Nebraska game in Lincoln, remember,
laughed in Nebraska's face.
Yeah, and basically told him, you guys know what's about to come to you.
Yeah.
Like, I think I'm more. I dislike that more than just the like solidarity of we're just looking at the. I mean, Deshaun Singleton was like looking at the ground, like he didn't want to. What if you just shake their hands and like just coldly stare into their eyes? Like I liken it to like a boxing match where they come out and smack gloves before the game, and it's just posturing. Like it's whatever. We've talked about this enough.
Okay. All right. Let's take a break then. When we come back, we have 100 things to discuss because, by the way, as you mentioned, Mitch, it is indeed December, and we're about to have a wild, wild ride over the next 30 days, including a Nebraska bowl game. We'll be back after this.
Okay, Mitch Sherman here to tell you about Game Time, because basketball season is here and in full swing, and Game Time makes getting tickets easier to basketball games. Want to see a buzzer beater, a great OT game? You can't do it if you're not in the arena. Game Time offers tickets for concerts, shows, not just sports, and football games too. It's bowl season, it's championship season around the sport of college football. Game Time can help you get into stadiums. Check out the feature of the Game Time app called Game Time Picks. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of options. Nebraska basketball got North Florida coming into PBA on Sunday today. If you're listening to this show, you want to get into the arena, get on Game Time. Last home game for the Huskers until Indiana in the Big Ten opener on December 13th. How about that upcoming Creighton, Kansas game in downtown Omaha on Wednesday, maybe an NBA game? Game Time allows you to customize your spot in the basketball arena. I love that you can get curated deals to make it easier to find the best price. And there's the Game Time lowest price guarantee. Finally, check out the Super Deal. It's a unique feature that allows you to take advantage of event cancellation, job loss protection. Get it all at Game Time. Download the app today. Go to Game Time, see what they've got. Game Time, get it done. All right, welcome back. Mitch Sherman from The Athletic here with Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone. Connor, you mentioned it was a crazy weekend in the sport of college football. In addition to the Nebraska game that ended, as we know, 13-10 with the walk-off 53-yard field goal. Oh, by the way, I'm looking back through our picks for Week 14.
Oh.
And hey, you beat me on the halftime temperature. It was 15 degrees in Kinnick Stadium at halftime. I went outside with a thermometer and took the temp, or maybe I just looked at the AccuWeather app. But you said 17, I said 12. You had to get within 2 degrees, and
Wow.
so you win it. You win it by
1.
By 1 degree. We'll go over some of the other results later this week. We'll have a full slate of 5 shows or so. I will tell you that our bonus bet backfired. We both picked John Hole to get the longest field goal. So that did not happen. That was Drew Stevens. That was the decisive points in the game. In the Big Ten on Saturday, as we've discussed, Michigan beat Ohio State for the 4th consecutive time, and Penn State will represent the Big Ten. Well,
they'll be
Penn State and Oregon
representatives.
Yeah, there's no representatives from divisions, but it's going to be Penn State and Oregon after Indiana took care of Purdue 66-0 on Saturday night. Saw that one coming. Should have bet that. Should have went to FanDuel and bet that. Like I was adamant. I think you were too, that the 28.5 point Indiana line was too small, but whatever. I'm way under 500 this year. So
we had an 8 overtime game with Georgia and Georgia Tech.
Yes, 8 overtimes between the 2-point conversion contest that would not end. The Big 12, Iowa State is going to the conference championship game to play Arizona State. Cyclones have their first 10-win regular season in school history with the victory against Kansas State on Farmageddon Saturday night in Ames. So interesting week ahead. College football playoff selections a week from today on Sunday. Bowl selections a week from today on Sunday. What do you think? What do you believe that Saturday did for Nebraska's postseason?
Well, it was widely talked about going into the game that Nebraska, if whoever was the winner of that game, was going to the ReliaQuest Bowl in Tampa, and Iowa seems to be the representative for that game, considering they've been there, it feels like 100 times over the last 8 years or whatever. Like they go to Tampa every year, and they'll be happy to make a return to Tampa, I would imagine. It feels like Nebraska and Michigan are kind of in this same spot right now. Who's more attractive? Nebraska obviously hasn't been to a bowl game in a long time. What's the Michigan turnout look like? What's the traveling party look like? So you're probably looking at the Music City Bowl. I guess there's probably still an outside shot at the Pinstripe Bowl, which Christmas in New York would be fun for everybody, I think.
Fun and cold. Yeah, I think the thing that could have thrown a wrench in, it looked fairly settled that the winner in Iowa City would go to Tampa, and then if Nebraska lost, it would probably go to Nashville. The Michigan victory throws a wrench in that a bit, in the sense that Michigan at 6-6 looked like the Pinstripe Bowl in New York was a perfect fit. New York would want Michigan, it would all make sense. But at 7-5, Michigan may have played its way above the Pinstripe Bowl, and if that happens, then that game has to find someone else, and that it could be Nebraska, which has never been to that game. I don't know. Maybe Michigan will be okay with that and say, now we want to go to New York. Of course, they recruit the heck out of the state of New Jersey, and that could be beneficial for Michigan, probably intending never to play again in the Pinstripe Bowl, but get it done while you're 7-5. So if that happens, then Nebraska, I think, does end up in Nashville against an SEC team.
Yeah. It seems that way. And then the other top non-playoff bowl eligible team is Illinois, who picked up their 8th win this weekend against Northwestern. So they're in the conversation as well.
Yeah. And then we got the week ahead. For Nebraska, as I mentioned, it's signing day this week. Expecting news, I don't know, maybe by the time you hear this podcast, that Cortez Mills, the receiver out of Florida who's committed to Oklahoma, will flip his commitment to Nebraska. That seems to be very much on the cusp of happening. Huskers are still out there in the running for Michael Terry, the receiver from San Antonio, who 5-star, down to Nebraska and Texas. Texas is, I would say, the favorite in that one. And there's Chase Lofton to watch too, the tight end from Millard South, 4-star, committed to Florida State, likely going to make it. Well, he will in fact make his final decision here before signing day on Wednesday. So unusual time for sure for signing day, as there are teams out there all over the country preparing for conference championship games. And here we are with recruits signing, and then the transfer portal opens on a week from
next Monday.
Next Monday, December 8th and 9th. And it's coaching carousel season. So Nebraska has to figure out what's going to happen with Dana Holgorsen. Can you lock him up? Okay, let's veer off track just a bit here. How much should Nebraska be worried? I mean, legitimately be worried that there is a line of teams out there to hire the Huskers' 3-game offensive coordinator. I know we've as a community, I think the community of Nebraska football has really fallen head over heels for this guy, but has he done enough to impress the suitors from around the country who come calling this time of year?
It's pretty attractive, right? I mean, when he came in and basically, kind of didn't fix Nebraska's offense, but certainly made it, more competent immediately. I think that's a great selling point to a lot of people around the country, and specifically a lot of people who, their seats might be getting a little bit warm. Hey, we got to have a good offense this year. Otherwise we're in deep trouble. So I think Dana Holgorsen is probably looked at that way. All the more reason for Nebraska to really, really pay up and keep him.
Unless he's going to be a head coach, the money issue is somewhat moot because Houston's got to pay him $4.5 million this year. So what's going on at Oklahoma State? Just got throttled by Colorado on Saturday, and Holgorsen has Oklahoma State ties. Would they even think about parting ways with Mike Gundy at this point? And if you do that, I mean, is Dana a guy who gets that look? My thought on what's happening right now is that we're maybe overvaluing his stock a little bit. He coached 3 games with the Huskers, and they scored 13 against USC, 10 against Iowa, and then beat up a downtrodden Wisconsin team. Like, undeniable impact he had. I think he provides Nebraska with a ton of positive energy and hope and momentum for the future, and he's essential to like keeping the band together with some of the young talent on the Nebraska offense who've seen him go to work here in Lincoln over the past few weeks. But I don't know that there are going to be schools lining up to poach him based on what he's done in Lincoln over the past 3 to 4 weeks. A month ago, he was a guy who was trying to be an analyst at TCU. And I think in the eyes of a lot of people, that's still where he's at.
It only takes one, though. It only takes one if indeed that is the case. So I don't know. I don't know. Anybody's like quite 100% sure what Dana Holgorsen wants. Like, would he give up this situation to go be a head coach at a group of 5 or something like that? Like, I don't know. So there's a lot of that, more stuff outside of Holgorsen in the Nebraska coaching carousel, realm.
Keep your eye on stuff for sure. Like, coaches are on the move this time of year, and recruiting is a bit more because signing days earlier. They're not as all involved with recruiting, more attention on being able to interview for jobs. Like, stuff's going to happen fast. Like, we're here, it's December. Stuff is going to happen fast, and there are going to be things out there that impact and involve Nebraska.
So just before we go here, the Pinstripe Bowl is December 28th.
Okay.
In the Bronx. That is the Saturday after Christmas. Christmas is a Wednesday this year. The Saturday after Christmas, just so everybody can find that on their calendars.
And the Music City Bowl is the 30th, the following Monday in Nashville.
So that's the Pinstripe Bowl is 4 weeks from Saturday, from yesterday. So a lot's going to happen in the 27 days in between. That's all. Yeah, that's what we're going to talk about basically all throughout this month. Okay, Mitch. that is it for us. We'll be back with regularly scheduled pods from home this week, which is great for everybody. And we appreciate you listening. As always, thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On Big Ten podcast. Find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.